Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to give you an overview of the PlayStation Mobile Studio integrated development environment, and I'm also going to run a very small PlayStation Mobile application that you could deploy to your PlayStation Vita. So to begin, I've started the PlayStation Mobile Studio, and as you can see, this is the welcome screen. I'm going to start a new solution just by clicking here. And what that does is it opens a window and it asks me the kinds of applications I'd like to build. So we are here in Mono, and I can create a console application in C#, and we'll do that a little bit later in these courses. But right now I want to click on the PlayStation Mobile, and I'm going to create a PlayStation Mobile application. Make sure that you don't click the library or empty project, but actually the PlayStation Mobile application, and then specify a location for it and give it a name. I'm going to call this Star Shooter, and you'll notice that it creates a solution name here. Make sure that the create directory for solution is checked, and what that means is inside of your documents folder and in the projects folder, it's going to create a folder for this project, in this case Star Shooter, and then all the files associated with this project will be inside of there. So go ahead and click OK. And it's going to work its magic and create a new solution for you. Now, a solution is made up of multiple projects, and in this case I only have a single project inside of this solution. That's the default. And if you expand this tree view, you'll notice that it's created a bunch of files here for us. The references are all of the code files that are already written for us, and we don't have to write those. So it's included the SCE, PlayStation.core, and System Core, and System XML, and these are files that contain code that we'll need to use, but we don't have to write, so that's actually really nice. Later on I'll show you how to include new references, but for now it's including everything that we need. In the shaders folder, we've got Simple FCG and Simple VCG, and those are going to help us with our graphics rendering, but those are already written for us and we don't have to deal with that. App XML is a file that sets up some meta information here, so if you just double click on that, it'll open up in the code viewer. And we don't need to mess with this, but you can see later that we will edit some of these options, and it just tells a little bit about our project. AppMain.cs is a C#, so the .cs extension stands for C#, and AppMain is the main code for our program. So go ahead and open this up, and you can see that we've already got quite a bit of code that's written here for us, and that's quite nice. I can also tab between the different code views and look at the different files that are open, and I can also close files. So all we need is the AppMain.cs. Go ahead and keep that open. Over here on the right-hand side, you have this properties view, and right now it is telling us something about this app main, what it should do when we build or create our program, where it's located, the name of it, and so forth. And we don't really need this right now, so if you want to increase the amount of space that you have for your code, you can just click on this icon here, and it'll hide it over here as one of these tabs. So you'll notice that we've got a toolbox. We have the document outline, and we have the properties. And if you want to keep any of those open, you just click this and it will pin that thing open. But for now, let's hide away the properties, and let's just focus in here on the code. So let's go through this code a little bit at a time. Up here at the beginning, I've got all of these using statements, and what that does is it refers to the references that we have. So you'll notice we have the SCE PlayStation Core, and we'll be making use of SCE PlayStation Core using this using command. Now, typically you won't need to modify these at all, so we'll just leave those alone for now. The next thing I want to focus on here is this notion of a namespace. And a namespace allows us to categorize the code that we write. If we have large programs, then we're going to need to organize our code in a meaningful way, and namespaces are a way to do that. Now for now, we don't really need to worry about that, so we'll just leave it alone. The public class AppMain is our main program, so I'm defining a new class, and we'll talk about what object-oriented programming and defining classes are a little bit later. And then here we have a private static graphics contents called graphics. And what this is a variable that we'll use later in our code to draw things to the screen. Public static void main is the beginning of where our program will always start, and so this is our actual main program. It's going to run a function called Initialize. It's going to do something for us to get things going, and then so long as true is true, which means forever, so this while loop says do this forever, we're going to check to see if there are new events we have to handle, like button presses or taps on the screen. I'm going to process those. I'm going to update the game state, and I'm going to render, or I'll draw the screen that should be displayed for the game. So what this is going to do is continually loop this forever, checking for new events I need to process, updating my game state, and then drawing or rendering the game screen. So you can see that this is the main game loop, and this will be true for all of your games that you write this term. So let's look at this. The first thing that our main game does is call this Initialize function. So it's actually going to jump down here into the Initialize function and do whatever code that we have written here. Now you'll notice that I've got this public static void and then the name, and you'll see that repeated here and here and here as well. So we're defining a function or a chunk of code and then offsetting it and placing it elsewhere. So this is a really nice way for our programs to stay organized, and you'll do this throughout this term as we do our programs. So I'm going to run this Initialize function here, which is going to set up my graphics variable. See, we declared it here, and now we're actually saying that I want graphics to be equal to a new graphics context. And what that'll do is now graphics is going to be a reference to or a pointer to the ability to draw something on the screen. Okay, so that's only going to happen once. The Initialize is outside of this while loop, so we're only going to call the Initialize once. And then every frame we're going to check for events and then update and render. Now check for events is written elsewhere for us. We don't have to worry about that code, but we do have the update and the render functions that we need to define. In our update function, it's quite simple, and this code was already given to us, but we're going to look at the gamepad and get the data off of that. So I want to know, are any buttons being pressed? Are any of the D-pad or the thumbstick being moved? And so now gamepad data is going to hold information about any buttons that are being pressed. Now right now I'm not doing anything with that, but later in this course we're going to fill in some information and check to see if the user is pressing any buttons, maybe fire missiles and that kind of thing. In the render function, we're going to place all of the code that we need to actually draw stuff to the screen. And the first thing we're going to be able to do is our graphics variable, which we'd set up here, is going to run this code called SetClearColor. And 0, 0, 0, 0, we've got 4 variables here for the red, green, blue, and alpha channels. And if they're all set to 0, then it's going to be black. If I set all these to 1, it would be pure white. I'm then going to clear once I've set the clear color, and that's going to wipe out whatever's on the screen and reset it to this color, in this case black. And then swap buffers is going to actually do the drawing. And the way the graphics works on the PlayStation Mobile platform is I'm going to draw to a buffer or an area of memory that you don't see, and once I've gotten everything I want on that screen the way I like it, it's going to copy that hidden screen onto what is visible. And this way we don't get any tearing or any kind of visual artifacts as we're building the screen. So the best thing to do is to actually draw this on the back buffer and then swap it, and it's going to continually be flopping the front and back buffers so that we never see the screen being drawn, we just see the new information as it's displayed. Okay, so that gives you a background of all of the code that's automatically generated for us, and you'll notice that we didn't write any of this, it's just given to us. So when you're ready to go, you can come up here and click on Run, and let's run this, and we'll get our program, and you'll see here that we've got the simulator running, and the screen is indeed black because that's what we told it to do. You can close this down, and let's make one change. Here in our set screen color, let's change this to 1.0 for the red component. Now these values range from 0 to 1, meaning none of the color to all of the color. So if we set red to be pure, 1, and leave the green and the blue components to be 0, and if we run this again, then we should get a red background. And indeed, that is exactly what we get. Now we're running this in the simulator, and the default size is exactly what we would need for the Vita. So later on in this term, what you can do is take your code that you've written, the game that you've perfected under the simulator, and then deploy that to your Vita. And you can choose what you want to deploy to here by selecting in this drop-down. You'll notice that we're actually running on the simulator. If I had a Vita connected to the PlayStation Mobile IDE here, then I could select that and connect it and then run that on my Vita. But for now, what you should understand and the takeaway from this is that the development environment is actually quite nice. We have the references and all of the code for our solution and our project that's going to appear here. I can examine the properties and then hide that away if I'd like. And the basic flow of the default template is inside of main, I'm going to run Initialize, and then forever I'm going to loop through this, calling for checking events and then the update and the render. And the update and the render functions are defined here. I'm going to set my clear color and then clear off the graphics, and never forget to swap your buffers. And that'll do it for this tutorial on the basics of the PlayStation Mobile IDE and your first PlayStation Mobile application.